Hi, guys. I'm so honored to be here with all of you today. In fact, of all the talks I have done this year, this is probably the one that's most important to me. So thank you for coming and spending your Sunday here with us at the Computer History Museum and listening to me. I think there are a lot of similarities between all of you and me. And so I want to share with you guys what my life like now has been about and how I became a designer. So you guys, good to get started? Everyone's comfortable? Yes. Yeah? Okay. I want you to stop me and ask questions whenever you feel like. So ask me lots of questions. Don't be scared about asking anything at all. You can't upset my feelings. There are no bad questions. And I want to make sure that this is like very, not just you listening, but you really sort of like thinking about the stuff that I'm saying. All right? Okay. So my name is Vibha, and I'm a designer. And what that really means is that I love making things. Like many of you, like you guys are doing a little project earlier this morning, and then you're going to do a bigger project later at the end of the day. And I was just like you. I loved to make stuff. But it's changed a little bit now. Now, I love to make things that is going to make people's lives better. I want to make things that a lot of people will use, and it will make their life better. And there's a difference between just making something and making it for a purpose. And I want to tell you about this difference and how I learned about it when I was about your age. So when I was about your age, I was growing up in Bombay, which is in India. Do you guys know where India is? Yes. Excellent. It's really, really far away from here. It's really far away from here. And just like you, I used to like do camps like this with like lots of my friends and other students. And I also obviously went to school every day. And this is kind of like what my class looked like. And we had to wear a school uniform every day. And I was also required to wear this badge every day, this little small badge. It's about 2 inches wide. And the way I had to wear this badge was using a safety pin. So every morning, I felt incredibly stupid because I could not wear this badge. And my bus was waiting, and my parents were screaming at me, and I felt like I wasn't intelligent or something because I had to struggle so much to put this thing on. And then one day, my dad said, just calm down, don't be upset. It's not your fault. And he showed me the safety pin, and he said to me that this object is not user-friendly. It's not you, it's the way this thing has been designed. And this was a really big moment in my life because I realized that user-friendly means that the person who made something, it could be anything. It could be a safety pin, a closet, a school bag, a phone, that it was their responsibility to make sure that the thing which they made was easy to use, it was easy to operate, and it was easy to understand. And this was really big for me because I realized that I wasn't the one who was being stupid. It's the person who made this thing that didn't do it right. And my whole world totally changed from this moment. It was like a whole new beginning. I started like a completely new dialogue with myself every day. I looked at all the closets in my house, all the furniture, and constantly compared it. So between these two closets, which one is easier to use? Why do you guys think it's the one on the right? Excellent, excellent. That's an excellent point. And you don't even have to use the object to see that it has handles. Just by looking at something, can that object, that system, suggest clues to you about how to use it, right? There's also another difference if you look at the edges of these furniture objects. What do you think that is?
It's rounded, so you aren't going to get poked with it.
Exactly. And so I started to understand what are the pros and cons. Like there are benefits and there are with benefits also come some negatives, right? So what are the pros and cons of like having sharp edges versus rounded edges? Are sharp edges cheaper to make? Did the carpenter who made the furniture, was it easier for him to make a sharp edge or a rounded edge? Exactly. Similarly, I started thinking about materials. Like, what does it feel like to touch these different things? Does touching wood feel better than touching metal or steel? Do you guys think that you think about this a little bit in your day-to-day life? There are so many different fabrics and surfaces that we touch, right? And some you like more than the others. This is also a tiffin box that my mother bought for me, and on day 1, it closed properly, and by the 10th day, it was really difficult to close. I would have to struggle with it. And I also started to realize that like good design means that things last. They work as they're intended to work on day 1, but also on day 100. So good design is like long lasting. It's not just like the day you buy it, it works well, and then it quickly falls apart. I also started studying gadgets around me, so things like remote controls, etc. And I realized that there was sort of this language of information around us. There were colors, like red and green, that are used here to operate like on and off, but they're used in some other places in our life also. What are some places where you see red and green to mean specific things? Yeah? Excellent traffic lights. Watermelon, excellent. That's great. Stop signs, exactly.
Like probably like the home phones, like
Yeah. Yeah.
in a parking garage at a mall where green lights when the spot is empty and red lights when the spot is full.
Exactly. So there's a little bit of a universal language happening around us where certain colors mean certain things. And what's interesting is that I started to look at these not just in India, but like what do they look like in China? What do they look like in Japan? What do they look like in America? Do colors mean the same thing in different countries? Or do they have specific meaning depending on the country that you see it in? In some cases, they're universal, and in other cases, they're not. So I started to develop an interest in how information was encoded, both in like using symbols and colors. In addition to colors, you'll also see little like signs there, like plus, minus, or little like back and forth, like chevrons or carrots. And so these have meaning too. So a lot of my school life, I was constantly having this dialogue with myself about every object that I saw. And it's been one of the greatest strengths for me. It's this idea of curiosity that like leads to critical thinking, where you look at something and you break it down and you're able to understand, well, why was it made like this? What was the reason the person made these trade-offs? How is it meant to be used? Is it meant to be used inside the house, outside the house? Can it withstand weather conditions? Is it meant to be used by one person or multiple people? And things like that. And so I'd encourage you that for the rest of your school life and as you go to college, like maintain your own curiosity. Like think very deeply about the objects and the symbols and the information that you see around you. And not just like look at like what's wrong and what's right, but try to think about why was it done a certain way. So I graduated from school and then I went to college, like many of you will. I took exams and I did a bachelor's in electrical engineering. And so what you do when you study electrical engineering is you study the technology of electricity. And so I did a lot of work with like resistors and capacitors, kind of like the project you guys are doing this morning. And because I was curious and constantly observing the work I was doing, I was also thinking about really what part of this do I care about? You're going to do a lot of things in your life, and you will love some things more than others. And it's really important for you to think about what's the part that I love, because that's the part that you should work hard at. You can work hard at everything, but that's going to be less interesting than really focusing and really working hard at the parts that you love. And for me, it always came back to people. Like, machines were powerful and they were very interesting, but I wanted to know what role did they play in people's lives? How did someone use this? Like, for instance, you guys did a project this morning with turning on an LED light. How do you think your mom or your brother or your sister could use that in their day-to-day life? That's what was most interesting for me. I wanted to know that this thing that I'm making, how's it going to help people? Is it going to save them time? Is it going to make them smile? Is it going to make them smarter? And really, all of these things are good things. But like, how can I focus on thinking about the purpose of my work? So from there, I graduated from engineering college. I was always just observing myself and looking at what are the parts I love the most. And because I cared about people, I wanted to make a switch from engineering and study human-centered design. And human-centered design is a process where you make things, but you really focus on people. You think about their needs. You think about how they behave, and you almost custom make solutions for them. So when I was studying design, I was still making things, but now my focus was very much about the application of these little machines. So this is one of my early projects, very similar to kind of the stuff maybe you guys are going to do in the coming few weeks. So this is a little Arduino, kind of like a Raspberry Pi project. And what it does is it waters a plant. I had a plant in college, and I always forgot to water it. And so I thought, OK, how can I create a system where I can send a message from my phone, and the plant will get watered every morning? Now, as I was doing this, I was getting closer to the things I wanted to do. So I was doing smaller projects. I was thinking more about what role they play in people's lives. But I was starting to observe something new. If you look at these two things, they look so different. Like, machines feel like cold. They have hard edges. They have wires. And natural things in the world, like people and plants, look so different. And I was like thinking, why can't we bring these things closer together? Like, why can't machines feel more like people? And so I wanted to get away from things like this. I didn't want machines to look like this. This could still be what was making the machine work, but this is not what the person should touch. This is not what the person should interact with. So one of my first projects after this was an alarm clock. So we were thinking about how can we make an alarm clock that feels like there is something that can almost sleep in bed with you. So I teamed up with a friend of mine. Of course, we still had to build things. So he focused on the engineering aspect of it, and I focused more on the behavior and the interface. So what did this clock feel like when you touched it? How did it sound? I, for one, hated waking up in the morning. And I hated all the alarm clocks which made these like loud, annoying sounds. So I was thinking about how can we bring more empathy to machines? Do you guys know what the word empathy means? OK. That's one way of putting it.
It's like to connect with another person's feelings.
Exactly. It's to connect with another person's feelings. And so I was thinking that, like, in the morning, how do people feel? You feel tired. You yawn quite a bit. Yeah?
They feel like they want to go back to sleep.
You want to go back to sleep. Excellent. Grumpy. Exactly. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to create an alarm clock that was empathetic, that it didn't want to wake you up, but it just wanted to make sounds that kind of reflected the same sounds that you made. Really, one of the first things that the clock did was it made a loud yawning sound. So the time when you were supposed to wake up, instead of making a ringing sound, it made a yawning sound. And then after it yawned, after a few minutes, it would yawn again. Then it would start like making sounds of like light waking up. Then it would start humming like a little song like you do when you brush your teeth or you're putting on your clothes. And then it would start talking about like things that you should be doing today. Now, one of the things when I learned when I was doing this project is that things almost never work. You will have lots of issues, things will break down. You might not have the parts that you need. For instance, when we were doing this project, like the sound output blew out on the last day, right before we had to make our presentation. We also had many more ideas. We wanted this to look more like something like this. We wanted to integrate like all the machinery inside the little dog. And then we thought maybe we can make like a family of little pets, and all of them like kind of yawn simultaneously. And what we realized is that there's almost never enough time to do everything you want to do. There will always be something missing. Either you won't have the time, sometimes you might not even have the skills. You might have an idea of what you want to do, but you might not know really how to bring it to life. Sometimes you might not have the money, and sometimes you might not be able to convince other people. And these are things that we call constraints. These are like limitations. And one of the things that I learned in college was that true creativity is about bringing your ideas to life in spite of constraints, because constraints will always be there. And if you really believe in what you're doing and you really care about it, you have to find a way to make it come to life, and there is always a way. And it doesn't have to be perfect, because you can always improve on things. But you have to find a way to get the basic idea to work. OK, so this was a little bit about like when I was studying design. I did many more projects like this. We tried to think about, can toasters look like little cars? Can plants talk to each other and not just water themselves, but send water to other plants? So we did a lot of like similar Raspberry Pi projects, like the ones you guys are doing. And after this, I started sort of one of my first jobs, and this was in San Francisco, pretty close to here. So I moved from Bombay to New York to San Francisco. And one of my first jobs was at Wikipedia. Do you guys know what Wikipedia is? OK, can someone tell me what it is?
It's like an online thing, kind of like a Google thing, and it lets people edit and put whatever they want onto it.
Exactly. That's great.
It's kind of like online encyclopedia, and it tells you about different things. For example, like what is displaying right now? Half dome.
Exactly right.
It's an open source website where basically anybody can edit it. So knowledge from everywhere can basically combine into one website, I think. I don't know.
Exactly, that's exactly right as well.
It's both free and secondary.
Right, absolutely right. And so what Wikipedia wants to do is they want to catalog the sum of all human knowledge in an online space, so people can look things up and get answers, and people can also contribute information. Now, I'm sure you guys use phones and you use some apps like Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat. Do you guys use some of these, or you know about them? OK. Well, so then let's go back to the example of Wikipedia, right? So now this was a big change sort of in my life. In college, I was making these little alarm clocks and projects for myself. But when I joined a company, it was much more about like thousands and millions of people are going to use what I make. And also, I'm no longer working alone. I'm working with a group of people. I'm working in the digital space. And so the definition of design also started to change a little bit. Like, what does better design in the context of Wikipedia mean? Like, what could it mean? What do you guys think it could mean? Any ideas? Yeah? Sorry? Excellent. That's a great idea, yeah. Attracting people. How can we get people to read more? Because we know this is really good information. It makes people smarter. That's a good point. Like, yeah, just like physical objects have sharp edges, maybe digital objects should have rounded edges as well. See, there was someone there.
Like moving images more than just a regular.
Right. All these are excellent, excellent ideas. And so I wanted to talk to you not just about what good design is, but what is the process of designing any of these digital products. So the way you think about design when you create like a website or an iPhone app or an Android app is you think very broadly. You think about like, why do people use this? When do they use it? Where do they use it? And how do they use it? So why is very much about like, what purpose does this play in people's lives? The when is very much about, do they use it while driving? Do they use it in the morning? Do they use it when they're eating dinner? Do they use it while they're watching TV? Where do they use it is another really important one. You know, do you use it at work? Do you use it in a hospital? Do you use it while you're at a party? And the last one is how. You know, are you listening to it like you listen to music? Are you just looking at it? Are you discussing it with your friends? So all of these are sort of like behaviors in the real world that we have to think about when we think about design. So we observe people in natural spaces. And this would apply to any product you're designing. You think about what does the real world look like? How do people go about their life? And how does this digital product fit into their lives? You think about what are existing behaviors? How do people use technology today? Do we want them to use it just the way they do it today, or do we want it to be different? Do we want to try to create a new behavior? And from there, once you start to have some ideas about what you want to do, you start to make sketches. And these sketches are really sort of like wide. It's about like thinking deep, but also thinking really wide. So for instance, in the case of Wikipedia, I'm thinking about what are the ways in which people learn. They look at pictures, they look at text, they talk to friends, they ask Google, they look at maps, etc. They get their answers from lots of different websites. So what role does Wikipedia play? From there, you start to narrow in. Sorry, go ahead.
Did you do all that?
Yeah.
That's so cool.
I'm sure all of you sketch, and you know, like sketching. The purpose of sketching is just to help you think. It doesn't have to look one way or another, but it's a way of like helping you focus in on specific ideas, and so you start very wide, and then you get narrower and narrower, and then you maybe pick one or two things, and you're like, okay, I'm going to start here, because you can't solve everything. There will always be lots of ideas, and there will be lots of directions. And your role is to sort of think about like, what's the smart way to start? What are the one or two things I'm going to pick and try to solve for? And from there, you start to do like more refined sketches. You make sketches that are the size of a phone, and you think about, okay, this is all somebody can see when they're looking at a phone. What do I want them to see? What do I want them to be thinking about? And after this, you start to like you go into like slightly higher fidelity. And by fidelity, I mean like details. Now you step away from like a pen or a pencil or a paper, and you start to work in a computer. So you use tools like Photoshop or Sketch, and you start to make like little designs like this that just talk about your basic concept. And then once you have a good idea about like, I think this is a better design than what we have today, then you start to share it with your team. You talk to other people about it, and you have to do a little bit of selling about it. Because if you're a designer in an organization, you have to also convince people that this is the right direction. And then from there, with lots of hard work and lots of building, breaking, testing, you finally come to like digital products that kind of look like this. They look polished, they look clean, they've been tested, and then you sort of put them out in the world, and lots of people use them, and then you get feedback, and then you make them better. So I hope this helps you understand a little bit about like what designing anything that you see on a computer or a phone looks like. This is essentially the basic process. And one of my biggest takeaways from my first job at Wikipedia was that making things for the real world is actually really hard. When you do your own little projects, like in a team of 2 or 3 people with your friends, it's much easier. When you start to like work for a big company, there are many more constraints which come into play. You have a lot more power, but you also have a lot more constraints. And so at this point, it becomes really important to find a good team. You will need lots of skills. And while you enjoy some things, you will need to do things that you don't enjoy, for which you need to collaborate with other people who are good at those other things. And when we work together, we can go much farther and we can do bigger things. And I don't know if you've heard the saying, which says that if you want to reach somewhere quickly, you should go alone. But if you want to reach somewhere great and far in a way that is going to change the world, then you should take people with you. So a big part of your job, like starting right from now, is trying to see what are things that you enjoy, what are things that other people enjoy, and then build like teams together, find your partners, and find really the collaboration that's going to help you be successful in your work. Okay, so that was Wikipedia. Then I'll talk quickly about like the work I'm doing right now. I work at Airbnb. Does anybody know what Airbnb is about? Okay, great. I have a hand in the back. Maybe someone who hasn't gone before? Yeah. Yes, exactly. So Airbnb wants to, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, so basically Airbnb's add-on. It's basically a website where homeowners or owners of a residence basically can rent out certain rooms or maybe the whole house, certain spaces within their property for a set amount, for a certain amount of money for people to go there and easily find it instead of having to go to like booking.com.
Exactly right.
It's more direct and interactive website.
Yeah, exactly right. So Airbnb wants to change the way you travel. They don't want you to live in a hotel. They want you to live in someone's house. And they think it's a better experience than living in a hotel because you can have a more local experience. Living in someone's house is more comfortable than living in a hotel. It feels just like, they want it to feel like living just like in your own home. And so a lot of my design work now has become even closer to people. So the problems I'm thinking about are, how does it feel when you go to someone else's house? How do we make sure people can comfortably welcome each other? How can we make sure that it's easy for you to get into somebody's house? How do they give you their keys? We also want to think about families. How do we make families travel in a way that feels more natural and more comfortable? We want to think about how work is going to change. We think that like in the next 5 years, people will no longer stick to one office. They will be traveling and working out of like 200 cities in the world. And so what role can Airbnb play in that? And so really, the world is becoming so much smaller and so much more connected. By the time you guys are in college, it's going to be, the internet and the world is going to change even more. It's going to be even smaller and even more connected. And so coming back to the original problem of people, the problem is going to become, it's less about technology and more about people, because we know that technology can make anything possible. And now that anything is possible, like what do we want to do with it? Also, another really important thing to remember is that when you guys build things, you will no longer just be building things for yourself. You're making things which anybody, anywhere in the world will use. So it's really important to understand other cultures, other societies, people who live differently from us. And this is a great opportunity for you guys to do that, like while you're in school and while you're in college. Okay, the last thing that I want to leave with you is that when I was your age, I was also really interested in drawing letters, just basic letters, A, B, C. I used to think about how letters can look different. I used to use a calligraphy pen and do a lot of calligraphy. I really liked like black text when it was really dense and beautifully packed together. I wrote on everything I could find. I got my parents to paint a wall black and got chalk and drew all kinds of letters on it. I got hold of my cousin's computer and I drew letters on that. And I never thought that this would mean anything in my life, but this has been one of the most important things in my entire design career. Like studying letters and typography has been the single strongest aspect of my design work. And it's helped me in a big way while I was working with other people, in doing my own creative work, in working with like other museums and designing physical spaces. So having a chance to do work different than I do in my day job. And so what I want to leave you with is that observe yourself and think about like the things that you love and spend time practicing and studying them. And at some point in your life, like all this is going to like magically come together in ways that you can't imagine. All right, I'm happy to take some questions now.
I noticed how you emphasized that there's a lot of how their quality and consumer kind of interaction on the website. But I also understand that if you compare Airbnb and hotels, Airbnb, unlike hotels, the users, basically people that are selling to the consumers, they don't have to go through things such as routine checks, which hotels have to do, and a few people have died because of something as simple as carbon monoxide,
right,
which hasn't been checked, and a lot of the alarms are
right,
not functional. So how does Airbnb and how do you plan to fix things like this?
So that's an excellent question. And I think for me, the learning is that like when you join a company or an organization and you care about certain things, and I care about the things that you're talking about, and so I actually work very hard on making sure that the quality and the safety of homes is getting better. Like I would, if there were 10 projects I could do, I would pick the ones that first address some of these problems. And so like these systems, like all the new technologies in the world, like the self-driving car or the electric or the solar panels on the roofs or Airbnb, they're not perfect. And while they're evolving, it's up to like people like me and other people who work in the company to take the social responsibility of be like, this is a problem and we've got to solve it, and propose ideas and solutions and really make sure that people pay attention to this and they follow up and they give you the resources to solve the problem. So great question there. The short answer is that like, I think it's up to me to follow up and get people to focus and solve these problems. Yeah. Oh, actually, can I have your name when you ask a question also?
Okay. I'm Jada, and what's your favorite part about your job?
That is an excellent question. My favorite part of my job is the early phase when I'm thinking about exactly like what our friend, I'm sorry, I didn't quite get your name. I didn't quite get your name. William. Exactly the thing that William is talking about. That it's like, you know, if somebody is stuck in a situation in an Airbnb where they're feeling unsafe or uncomfortable, what can we do? So thinking about that situation in the real world and brainstorming concepts and sketching and coming up with ideas about how to solve it, which is the early part of the process, is still my favorite part of the design process. Go ahead.
How do you feel when you're making your creation?
So this is also a really good question. I feel really excited at the beginning because I see a lot of possibilities. And then, like I told you earlier, sometimes there are constraints. And so you don't end up getting to build everything you want. You end up doing some pieces. And so then I feel a little down. And then I get frustrated for a minute. And then I have to remind myself that it's up to me to make things happen. So then I come back and try to push myself and do more. So I would say it's like, it's up and down.
We've got one right back here.
Yeah.
What is the best way, like, you get ideas? And my name is Audrina.
What's the best way to get ideas?
Yeah.
I think the best way to get ideas is to expose yourself to a lot of different ways of the world, to learn about people and different cultures, because you'll see that like there's a lot of creativity in the world. People in Japan solve problems very differently from us. People in India solve problems differently from us. And we can learn from each other. And so a big part of creativity is just exposure, like talking to people and learning from them. And eventually, like in your lifetime, these things will come back to you at some point. It's like, oh, I spoke to that person 2 years ago and they were doing it in a certain way. You also get ideas from just looking at the way people behave around you. And as you spend time solving problems, you will also start to develop an instinct.
We have a question up front.
Yeah.
So my name's Natasha, and also, what's your favorite invention or like design that you've ever done?
That's a really good question. A design that I've done, or just a design that's out there in the world? A design that I've done. Okay. One of the designs that I really like that I've done is that when you use the Wikipedia app, let's say you're traveling, right, and you're in India, and you're near the Taj Mahal, what we do is, because we know you're traveling, we show you a really simple version of the article with lots of pictures and just the important pieces of information. So you don't see everything, but you see like a nice summary that makes you a little bit smarter because you know something about it, but it doesn't take up all of your time.
We've got one right here in the middle.
Okay.
How do you feel when you get customer feedback? And my name is Ivan.
That is a really good question. This group is full of really good questions. So getting feedback about what you make is really important. So sometimes it can make you feel really good because people can tell you that this thing you made is amazing and it makes my life better. And sometimes you realize that you're wrong. You designed it completely wrong. And that can hurt a little bit because you spent so much time and you got it wrong. But it's the time to like realize that it doesn't have to stop here. You can make it better. You can use this feedback. You can go back and quickly do it all over again. And then that solution will live much longer in the world because it makes sense to the user. So the short answer is that I think feedback can make you feel both good and bad, but really it plays a very important role in the design process. And so you have to embrace the feedback and maybe sometimes put your emotions aside. Does that make sense?
My name is Corbin, and what would you say is the hardest part, like the most challenging part of your job?
I think the most challenging part of my job is convincing people. And I realized this pretty late in my life, but convincing people about your ideas and the right thing to do is one of the most important skills that you can have. And sometimes we expect people to just understand what's right, and we expect people to see our perspective, but that's not correct. The responsibility is ours to bring people along with us and see the value of the idea.
So she's going to be here for lunch, and we will have a lot more time to ask her a lot more questions. To wrap up really quickly, though, could you offer some advice to the students as they go on to pursue things that they are interested in?
Yeah. I think the one piece of advice I would give all of you at this stage in your life is that observe yourself very closely and think about what things you love more than the others, and practice and study and focus on those pieces. And they will stay with you and they will become a part of your life's work.